Welcome to the Millennial Body Image Project, where we dive into the unique and messy body image journey that continues to shape our generation.
We're here to flip the script on toxic wellness culture, challenge weight stigma, and tackle the intersectional forces that shape how we see our bodies and our health.
Because your body is not a problem to be fixed.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the show. We are on holiday break from regular episodes, but surprise, we wanted to make sure your feed is not saturated with New Year's diet and body image nonsense without some support from us. So we are re-releasing an episode that was originally a Patreon exclusive from this spring, 2024, because this topic is still on everyone's minds and this conversation isn't going away anytime soon. So let's talk about GLP-1s, baby. Let's talk about you and all the ways the Oprah Ozempic Special is trying not to make you feel bad about your weight, but just bad enough to take these medications they're peddling. So let's talk about shame, blame, and the weight loss revolution. And here's the thing, is there is so much nuance to this conversation, and we never want anyone to ever feel like if they are considering these medications or if they are on these medications that they are not welcome in this space. Everyone is welcome in this space. But since there is so much nuance to this conversation, we had actually originally released it as a Patreon exclusive that was an hour long in this spring. But since we're on holiday break and this is still very topical, we wanted to share it with all of you as well as a little preview of what you can get over in Patreon too. So sit tight for a long, in-depth episode on our very unfiltered thoughts on the original Oprah Ozempic special from spring 2024, what this means for all of us as people in the wellness and nutrition spaces who have struggled with body image stuff and food stuff for a long time. And if you want more deep dive episodes like this every single month, go head over to Patreon at patreon.com/Millennial Body Image Project, and you can get so many more bonus episodes in addition to monthly bonus resources to go along with our episodes, as well as some totally ridiculous, fun deep dives on books and just some random stuff every once in a while, just for fun. Christina's getting pumped to record this episode because she was rage texting me the other night after she watched it.
It was so funny because Casey said that he was interested in watching it too. And I was like, okay. But then it's like, no, I'm going to watch basketball instead. I was like, well, don't be offended. I'm going to go upstairs and I'm going to watch this special and grin and bear it. And then I was like, I'll tell you if it's worth watching or not. Spoiler alert. I hated it.
Yeah. Okay. Let's back up. So welcome patrons to our end of the month exclusive episode. As you can probably tell by inference, we're going to be talking about Ozempic today and a lot of different things. Ozempic, the Oprah special, a couple different body positive influencers that have been targeted by Ozempic and Wegovy and all these other ones to promote it. And we're going to be talking about our thoughts from a wholehearted eating approach, as we typically do.
Yeah, I also want to say, like, we can't not talk about it, you know? Like, I feel like it's everywhere and everyone is seeing it. Like, I have more and more clients and I having these exact nuanced conversations in sessions multiple times a week now, talking about all of these different avenues and options. And so we both felt like we had to talk about it and we needed to say something and share it in a way, but we wanted to do it in a Patreon exclusive so we can share a little bit more of the nuance and get into it a little bit more and, you know, have it for you guys. And then I don't know about you, Dana, but I'm going to bring a little lightness to right now. But every time I go to record, like we start talking about this, I can only hear, let's talk about GLP. Like, let's talk about sex, baby. It reminds me of that, and I can't help myself. So I feel like this episode needs a quick disclaimer, too. People might assume that because this is an intentional weight loss drug, that we might feel really strongly one way about it. And we want you guys to know that everything that we're talking about in here is not intended to bring shame around people who are on it or ever considering getting any GLP-1s for a variety of different reasons. You know, there's a lot of different reasons why people get on it. I also just want people to know that I am navigating these conversations with my one-on-one clients in their eating disorder recovery journey and what that looks like and how they can potentially utilize some of the newest things that are out there, including things like Wegovy as part of a harm reduction outlook. And so we just wanted to make that really known, like right from the start. We're not promoting these drugs. We're not paid by these people to do this. We don't promote it, but we also don't shame people for having a really strong interest, desire, or even considering or are on these medications right now. And I don't think that they have to be you're either with us or you're against us kind of vibe. And I think you guys know that about us, but we want to make it very clear with today's episode that that is not where we are.
Well, I think it would also be really difficult not to have any kind of desire or inkling to want to go on these kinds of drugs, even before all these different specials and promotions were coming out, which are basically very biased infomercials saying everybody should go on Ozempic or Wegovy and it's the cure to everything. But even before that, I think it would have been very strange, given the population of people that we work with and listen to this podcast, to say like, oh yeah, I would definitely never ever consider like basically a magic pill where I don't have to worry about any of this stuff anymore. So we just wanted to bring some compassion around that of if you have considered this, regardless of what stage in the decision-making process you are in, we're not here to judge you. We're not here to bring any shame around that thought process or conversation. And we're here to break down the bullshit that's been going around.
Yeah, and I think also just bringing some general awareness around it and the wildly biased information that people are getting. And I think, we've always said that the most important thing to us is informed consent. And so we really like to try to provide information as neutrally as possible and also point out like, hey guys, this is also there too. Part of your consideration. The more you know, if you kind of vibe. So that's the idea behind this. But I think we should start off talking specifically about the Oprah special because a lot of people have been talking about it, hearing about it. Maybe some of you have even watched it and it made you feel, I think in some ways it's a little bit ick feel. But then I think for other,
a little.
Oh my gosh, no. But I mean, if you're new to this journey, right, you might feel a little, ugh. But you also might watch it and be like, shit, I want this. Like, this sounds so appealing. Is this so bad for me to do? And so let's talk about the Oprah special because it's called Shame, Blame, and the Weight Loss Revolution.
Mm-hmm. The first thing that I would say is I do not recommend watching this special for anyone. Christina watched it, so you wouldn't have to. And I did a lot of research on it because I don't have Hulu and I didn't feel like paying for it just to watch the Oprah special. So the first thing is like if you have any history of food stuff or body stuff, which like spoiler alert, everybody does, this is going to be varying degrees of very triggering for you. So I would not recommend that you watch it. One, because it's basically just one big biased infomercial for GLP-1s. And two, the different levels of shame that are being produced by this special are just wildly destabilizing. And so for that reason, I would not recommend it. And we're obviously going to go into this. But to bring some levity and understanding to this, I understand that there are a lot of people that are basically like very disappointed with Oprah and that she has done something like this. And even though she like quit the Weight Watchers board, but yeah, that's only so she can promote GLP-1.
She actually says that directly in the episode too, just real quick. She actually says, I left Weight Watchers board so that I could do this special, so I could be an unbiased, I'm using quotation marks, guys, an unbiased journalist interviewing about this topic. How unbiased can you be if you are yourself on the medication and promoting the use of the medication?
Well, it's also like because she has left the board of directors or whatever of Weight Watchers, she has a 12-month non-compete clause with being able to promote other GLP-1 companies. But that doesn't mean Oprah is a businesswoman at the end of the day. That doesn't mean that she's not planting the seeds of, oh, I'm the perfect poster child for these GLP-1s. I wouldn't be surprised if she came out with her own GLP-1 company or something at the end of this. I'm just saying. At the same time, it's understandable if you are feeling mad or disappointed with Oprah because she's promoting these GLP-1s. Because and I think she mentioned this in the special, is for 25 years, making fun of her weight has basically been a national sport. And not only is she dealing with weight stigma and all these other things of being in a larger body in the public eye, she's also dealing with anti-Blackness. So I think we have to keep that in mind of yes, of course she would go down this path, because if you were someone in a minority, if you're in someone who's in a larger body and every single inch of your skin has been under scrutiny for basically your entire adult life, it's not shocking that she would go down this path to reduce some of the discrimination.
Also, she's done weight loss type of things on her show for and has been, I think she originally was with Jenny Craig for a while. Then she did a liquid diet. Then she got on Weight Watchers. She's done a lot of different things that were a weight loss spectacle, in a lot of ways, and promoted it and showed her loss and gain of weight over and over again on her show. And so this is not really off-brand for Oprah to be involved in the next wave of what appears to be a highly effective medication for weight loss. So it's not shocking that she'd be the first person on their get list to want to have promoting and taking this medication. So I think with that, I bring Oprah a lot of compassion for all the reasons that Dana mentioned around, but at the same time, let's not forget business is business and bottom line is bottom line. And this is what this is. This is a business. The GLP-1s are a business as well. And I also just want to for the people who are curious or have watched it and they're kind of but they talked about, weight stigma. They talked about shame. They talked about all these things. Hey guys, this is the definition of virtue signaling is what they did in that episode, in that show.
And speaking of, so a couple weeks ago, if you all listened, we did a whole episode on that Washington Post article that was talking about how big food is co-opting anti-diet language. Speaking of co-opting anti-diet language, I mean, they're co-opting not only anti-diet language, but they're co-opting phrases and words from body positivity, from intuitive eating, from weight stigma. There's a ton of information here about how food noise, and they even talk about set point theory. And it's just, when you hear stuff like that on the surface, they're oh, wait, do they finally get it? Are they finally coming around? Because no, at the end of the day, this entire thing, I've said this 6 times, but this is a giant infomercial for GLP-1s. Basically, what they're trying to do is to provide a very biased panel of people saying, well, everybody should get on this. And they're also saying that the solution to weight stigma is to just lose weight. As if, oh my God, as if people haven't been trying to do that for years. But it's also you're completely ignoring why weight stigma exists in the first place. There's not a single word in here about trying to actually change why weight stigma exists and how people experience weight stigma and are basically shamed into losing weight, which they have tried to do for years and years and years. And when they can't do it, the weight stigma just continues. And they're saying, oh, we've found a solution to weight stigma. It's to take these GLP-1 drugs. And hey, insurance companies, we want you to classify the obesity as a disease, which they probably say, I don't even know how many different times. But in doing that, the basically whole goal of this special was to get insurance companies to cover Ozempic, Wegovy, all the different things so that more people can take it. And so when you're looking at this special with that lens, it's okay.
I watched the special so that you guys don't have to. But some of the things, I'm not laughing at what I'm about to say. I'm laughing at how incredibly biased this entire show, special, whatever you want to call it, this 43-minute infomercial was, because one of the things that they talked about a lot, and this is how I summarized it for Casey when Casey was like, so what was it about? I said, so basically what they said was the big O is a disease and that they have the magic cure for it. And they also compared it to alcoholism and said how we used to think of alcoholism as like, you need to get your behavior together, but we're now learning it's a disease and that they need support, and that they're comparing to that, the whole epidemic around that to that as well. And basically continuing the pathology of bodies and kind of going down that entire rabbit hole the entire time and basically saying, hey guys, we have a cure for this seemingly incurable disease that you all have because you're in a larger body. That's basically what the show is. And then what they do is they weave in all the ways that they had tried to sell you before and why they aren't working, basically reinforcing everything that the non-diet nutrition and anti-fat bias movement has been showing, like weaving in set point theory, weaving in, they even, like a doctor came on who specializes in weight loss for the Cleveland Clinic, talked about how calories in, calories out is nonsense, and how it's like compared it to drowning underwater. And it's like, yo, that's what you guys were telling us for millennia to do. Now you have this new thing. And to me, it feels like the entire episode, the way that they wove in these non-diet foundations for proving that dieting is ineffective, and then talking about the shame, is the definition of virtue signaling. They're basically trying to make it seem like, hey, we're on your side. We get you. We understand that you've been struggling a lot with your weight stigma and all this stuff. But hey, you know what? It's not your fault. It's a disease and you need to be cured. How fucked is that if you think about it from that perspective? And that is basically the message that is weaved in throughout the entire episode. I mean, throughout the entire special. I didn't watch the after the episode because I was like, I cannot watch any more of this nonsense. But another thing too about like the special as well that I think is important, that they talked about, they brought on doctors to talk about the product. And then after they talked about the benefits of the product, of the drug, they had a disclaimer come up on the screen and say, these doctors are paid by the following GLP-1 companies for research.
Talk about bias.
Do you mean to tell me that there were no other doctors available that aren't under payment for these drugs to come on and talk about it? There's got to be like 1,000 who could talk about it, some of which who would still talk about the benefits of it. And I think the thing that like really bothered me throughout it is the virtual signaling that was happening throughout it too. And like this idea of like, hey, it's not your fault that this happened. Okay, so now Oprah, if we're going to come after you, Oprah, if before it was about willpower, you touted willpower, you told us to do points, you told us to count calories, you told us to do this stuff, you told us that this is the way to do it, but you lied to us that entire time, seemingly, because you didn't actually feel any better. You continued to have food noise that you talked about during this special and all this stuff. So how am I supposed to look at you as a barometer for the realities of this and not as a salesperson for this? Because now you're telling me that everything you told us throughout the last 20 years about Weight Watchers is not true, and that there's evidence to back up that it's not effective. Okay, so where are we going to be 20 years from now when we're hearing about the next thing and you're talking about how the GLP-1 gave you throat cancer?
So that is the other thing that was crazy to me.
Sorry, guys.
These doctors there is no reason to be sorry for your opinion and your breakdown of this, because the whole thing is extremely biased. And if you don't believe us from all the things we've said so far, listen to this shit. So the doctors on there that, again, are paid, surprisingly disclosed, paid by these GLP-1 companies, okay? We have heard horror stories about Ozempic, a battery of GI conditions. There's a box warning for throat cancer. There's all these different things, right? And yet they're all saying, like, literally everyone should take this drug is what they're saying. And the thing that pissed me off the most as I was like listening to podcasts and reading review articles about all of this is that one of the doctors on there had the fucking audacity to be like, oh, well, the side effects are overhyped. Immediately after, they interviewed this woman from the audience who said she had to stop taking it because she had gastrointestinal bleeding. Okay, let's just gaslight the one person who was not actually extremely curated because they had a perfect positive experience to be on this special. And it's crazy that they would just say that these side effects are overhyped, because even for people who, quoting a Time article here, even for people who do have weight-associated health conditions, okay, whatever, GLP-1s can come with side effects, including gastrointestinal distress, headaches, pancreatitis, and obstructions of the digestive system. Some researchers have also raised concerns that they may contribute to an elevated risk of throat or thyroid cancer. That doesn't even go into the active malnourishment that is happening to people who are taking Ozempic because it's suppressing their hunger. That also doesn't even go into the potential long-term side effects that this may have that, quite frankly, they couldn't have research on yet because people haven't been on this for long enough. Talking about specifically gastroparesis and delayed gastric emptying, nobody's talking about how this may long-term contribute to something like small intestinal bacterial overgrowth because it's slowing down gastric emptying. Who the hell knows what this is doing to the gut microbiome? Like, this is just, it's crazy. And like, even after hearing all of that, you may still choose to go on something like Ozempic or Wegovy or whatever it is with the assistance of your medical provider, which is completely fine, right? No judgment. But it's important to know what are the potential side effects that may happen and not have a medical provider who's like, oh yeah, the side effects are overhyped. What?
Yeah. When she said that, that was really irritating. And that's like an understatement of the world, that it was irritating. But I think one of the things that what has been frustrating to me throughout that entire special is that they totally romanticized the benefits and talk about hyping up, right? They have overhyped the benefits and completely suppressed the real negatives that these people have. They did not bring that person on stage who was talking about their negative experience. They did not. They had them off to the side and had them just say their piece for a hot second. And then Oprah asked, will you get on another one? Because sometimes they say that it's just not the right one for you. And the person said, I'm just not comfortable getting on anything like that at the time. And Oprah's like, oh, okay, we understand. And then it was like, that was it. Then they spent 20 minutes talking about how they gave this to a teenager. And I find zero fault for anyone that they brought on there that is on it. I find zero fault for the mother who was standing next to her child talking about it. That is when the mom said they really came after me, my heart broke for that parent. Like, the amount of stigma that family must have experienced, the things that they have been going through that led, and the mother said that in the session. She goes, we didn't take this decision lightly. And we're now looking at my child being happier and doing things and more engaged and all of those things, which is why it's important to think about this from that harm reduction standpoint when you are thinking about getting on it. There are people out there who are considering bariatric surgery, which this child had already had. This child had already gone through all of that. And the mother said and talked about in the special about how it was like heartbreaking and they didn't want to be doing this, but they trusted their medical providers and went for it and did it. They're trusting their medical providers right now and they're trusting in that and going into it and making these decisions. And so to me, what is particularly gross about it, about the whole thing, is that instead of talking about it from that type of empowering place of like, let's bring informed decisions into this. Let's bring informed consent. Let's talk about harm reduction. Having a bariatric surgery that's cutting out a piece of you, that's a major surgery, might be a jump 10 steps further than you are willing or able or want to do. But what can we do?
And it didn't even work.
And it didn't even work for this poor kid. This poor kid had been through so stinking much. Like, I can only imagine the amount of ridicule that they've experienced and everything. Like, it's just awful. And they went to, like, their parents signed them up for camps and all these different things. And like, to be perfectly honest, I see these kids in my practice. These kids are coming to me as an adult, having gone through all of that and experiencing that and having all of that shame and guilt and carrying around this something is wrong with my body. And then now we have a medication that is basically reinforcing that. And this special reinforces that like there's something wrong with you. So we're going to change your body. And we found a medication that can do it. Is really harmful from like a long-term standpoint around trusting their body and everything about that. And like, what if they ever wanted to get off of it? What if they are on it for 10 years and then they start to have really bad symptoms from it? All of a sudden they have to get off of it. All of these different things are a part of that. And so it's important to have those types of conversations when we are talking about harm reduction, right? When we are talking about what are the layers here that we can utilize in this conversation in a safe environment that's going to be validating and supportive for you to navigate how you want to utilize or not utilize all of the available options for you to how you want to support yourself and your system. It's just, yeah, it's hard.
Speaking of the other poster child, basically, one misleading thing that I did not like that they didn't clarify was that they said multiple times, like, we have research on this drug. Like, we've been studying this for 20 years. Yes, you've been studying it for type 2 diabetes for 20 years. You haven't been studying it for 20 years for the, quote, miracle drug that you're promising that this is. And then speaking of type 2 diabetes, you know, when we're looking at someone who's taking this for blood sugar management, that's the entire point of this drug. Like, yes, but the misleading part about the way that they framed it was they're saying the weight loss caused her blood sugar levels to stabilize. When no, it's the drug that is designed for type 2 diabetes and for blood sugar management that allowed her blood sugar levels to stable. And based on the GLP-1 medication, it probably also caused her to lose weight. But those two are not one and the same. Just because one drug does both things, it doesn't mean that the weight loss is stabilizing her blood sugar. And the inference that happens is what's going to drive tons and tons of people to want to take 100%. This, because we've been sold and told for so many years that, well, if you just lose weight, it will eliminate all health conditions.
Well, they did talk about that. They said like, oh, my numbers are all stable and whatever. I'm in a good place. It's like, no. There are mechanisms of action that are happening that this drug was designed to do that is going to directly impact those numbers. They also said that they've engaged in lifestyle behavior changes too. Okay. So your cholesterol was a little bit high or something else was coming up too. You're now moving more and all these things. We do not have a pinpoint control that says that this is the only thing that led to that. But they are acting as if your weight itself is the reason for all of your health factors, where we have plenty of research that shows that you can have behavior change and have numbers impacted without any weight change. And there is research and evidence around that too. Last year, one of the things that like you made me think of was the step 2 study, which is basically the premise for what they did for GLP-1s and how it ended up getting approved for weight loss specifically, what Wegovy did. Not all of them are even approved by the FDA for weight loss. Just so you know, the only one that is Wegovy. Everything else is an actual type 2 diabetes medication that is not meant for, that has not been FDA approved. So we did a whole Ozempic 101 last March or something, last year, about a year ago. And where I talked about the breakdown of this, because we saw it coming. We're like, this is coming. Like, this is going to be huge. And it has just completely blown up. But one of the things that's really interesting in the research where they said, what is so misleading about what they said about we've been researching this for 20 years, is that they actually, in the step 2 study, dictate and write very clearly that they have no idea how this medication is impacting the outcome of weight loss. They believe that it has something to do with the hypothalamus. I don't know. That's a pretty important part of our brain. And they don't know how it's doing it. Can we all just take a minute and think about that for a second?
Yeah, it's a little terrifying.
They're telling us that this is what we need to be doing. And they are talk about like hyping and like glossing over stuff. Like, I would have loved to have been in a Q&A audience with them talking about like, so what is the mechanism of action in the hypothalamus? Why is it turning down this food noise? Do you understand why? What is it doing? No, they don't know. They have apps, and they say that directly in the study. They do not understand how this is impacting our brain. That's kind of terrifying, which is why I think it's so important when you're having conversations about going on this or not going on it or exploring that from various different reasons, right? You need to go in with that understanding. Sometimes the answer is still yes. Maybe it is better for you in your own personal journey to go on this medication from a harm reduction standpoint. Maybe it's going to help you with there is some research that's showing that it's helping with OCD and anxiety and things like that as well, because of this mechanism of action around like the internal mental chatter kind of noise that comes up specifically. But you have to weigh that out and understand what it is that you're getting involved in. You don't know why. They don't know why certain things are happening. And again, the answer might still be yes, because you're living with this experience and it's overwhelming and it's a lot and you can't take it anymore. And you're willing to do something kind of, progressive or drastic in order to get that outcome. That's your journey to decide. That is 100% yours to own.
One thing that is not talked about enough is that these drugs only work for as long as you take them, which sounds pretty self-explanatory, but unlike something like getting an organ removed, like getting your gallbladder removed or bariatric surgery, the medication is not inherently permanently changing the way that your body functions. So as soon as you go off these drugs, your body is not only going to revert to what it was doing before, but it's probably going to overcompensate in some way. And we don't have research on that. And so it's kind of like, well, the only thing that we know for sure is that people, when they go off Ozempic, is that they start gaining weight. They don't know how much necessarily, what is the average. And so basically what they're saying in this whole special is that if you want these benefits, you just got to take these drugs. Oh, and by the way, you have to stay on them forever. Oh, and by the way, we don't completely understand how they work.
Also, in the step 2 study, if you look at the graphs that they have for weight loss, it plateaus and then it starts to increase again, meaning that over time, you don't actually maintain that weight loss, but they stopped this. It shows evidence that maybe it's not maintained. But of course, like every weight loss research that's done, they stop it at the most convenient time for them. It's like, hello, convenienttheoriesforme.com. But Like, they stop it at this very convenient time. And what I find to be like, I want to share something real quick. So that I wouldn't share everywhere, but I share this
on a regular episode.
Woo!
Behind the scenes exclusive.
But let's say you're on this medication, or you are seriously considering getting on this medication for whatever reasons that you have. But I do believe that there is an opportunity for harm reduction. I'm going to continue saying that when it comes to it, because it is harm reduction in a lot of ways, with the opportunity for you can still work on your body image. You can still work on your relationship with food. You can still challenge certain types of foods and build things while so that while your capacity is increased, and be able to have a better relationship with food long term. We know going into it that this is influencing it. So if you were to go off of it, things might come up. We don't know what's going to happen because they've never done that before. They've never researched that. It says very clearly in the Step 2 study, it is expected to be taken for life. There is nothing out there that shows getting off of it. So, but if you're early on in your journey with an eating disorder and you feel overwhelmed and everything about it, and everything is like, the rumination is a lot and it's really difficult, and you want to have a respite so that you can start to build in other coping skills, there is a space for that with this. And that's what I mean by harm reduction. Not so much like, oh, this is better than going and getting bariatric surgery or something like that. It's more of like the capacity to incorporate certain types of skills can be quieted the same way that you might take an antidepressant to help give you some more serotonin so that you can learn those coping skills and have more accessibility to get them at the same time. The problem with things like Ozempic and Wegovy and all these GLP-1s is there is no research about tapering off of it and how that looks like after the fact. The same way that you can see that with antidepressants and things like that, you can actually show research that shows that you can taper off of it. So that's the main thing. But I just want people to know that if you're on it and you're like, but this is really helpful, your work hasn't stopped. Now is the time to dig in and do the work on changing the way that you relate to food in your body too. It just might be more accessible to you right now, which is cool, which is great that you have that accessibility. So then what are we doing? What are we doing with that now? Is that making sense?
Yeah. I mean, also to play devil's advocate, though, with the harm reduction scenario, right? Like, it's a very, very individualized decision that has to be made as part of like an entire care team. Because also, there's a lot of, and I know you know this, but I'm just saying for everybody, is like there's a lot of harm that can be done by something like Ozempic for eating disorders, because if they do suppress appetite, someone who's already not eating enough, this is the worst possible scenario.
Worst possible
that we
thing.
Can put them through.
Absolutely. That's what I mean. It's like it has to be with the support that is going to be taking into consideration all of the aspects of what is going on with you and your body and your relationship in your eating disorder. Like, this is very, very complicated. It's so heavily nuanced. But I think it is important to bring up that there is this gray area, that it's not just you're either for Ozempic or you're against it. There can be this space where it can be part of a longer look. I know that might be unexpected.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily think it's unexpected, but like you mentioned, this is why we didn't share this on a main episode, because that specific scenario is like a 0.00001% of people scenario. And at the end of the day, even just the talk about Ozempic is extremely triggering for people with eating disorders, disordered eating, body image stuff, right? There's a Time article that I'll link for you all. It's titled "For People with Eating Disorders, the Buzz About Ozempic is a Nightmare." And there's a bunch of different eating disorder organizations that have come out with statements since the Oprah special that I would encourage you to read. But one of the things that I wanted to circle back to is, they talk so much about shame and like it's not your fault and, all these things, but you just have to take the drug and then the shame will go away and the weight stigma will go away, which is fucking ridiculous. But I wanted to talk about the inherent harm that this special has done, not even the drug. Because now that this message is out there, that you can, like, if you have experienced shame, and from these people, we feel really bad for you, and we're so sorry that we told you calories in, calories out, and diet and exercise was the way to go, because we know that that doesn't work anymore. Yeah, okay, sure, you're still going to promote it. Maybe not the GLP-1 companies because they want you to pay for the drug instead, but all these other diet companies, they're still going to be doing the same thing. But a huge issue that I see here is if they're now saying, and it is widely accepted, let's say, or promoted by all these companies, that the solution to weight stigma and the solution to the shame and the solution to this poor child who went through all of this is to just take these drugs. There's now going to be an additional layer of shame and blame and judgment for people who decide not to take the drugs, because they're going to say, well, you're fat and we know that that's a quote disease. Why don't you just take the drug? What's wrong with you? There's an easy solution here. You should just be taking this. And then there's a whole nother layer to that of these kind of weight loss purists, let's say, who are going to be like, oh, well, taking the drug is like the easy way out. And it's like, oh my God. Like, there's just
no way to win.
There's no way to win. And there's so many layers of shame that is even being produced by the special alone. Forget the drugs. Like, we've already talked about a lot of that. But the inferences and the assumptions and the conclusions that this special is trying to make you draw are inherently so harmful and perpetuating weight stigma, which they're claiming they now have the answer to. It's just...
I want to go back to the other statement about eating disorders too. There's a lot of harm that happens in eating disorder world as well. And the reason why I feel like it's a really nuanced and important conversation to have one-on-one with your provider and your support team, like Dana mentioned, is because pushing medication on eating disorder treatment individuals is not foreign. It's nothing new. They've been doing this for years, and they've been doing it with other types of stimulants. And it's a certain subset of people and types of eating disorders that it's getting touted to and given to. And so I think it's really important to weave that in, that unfortunately, even that industry, which you would think would be a really safe place, is just now coming around to being weight inclusive and health at every size and things like that too. So I just want to point that out as well. So that's why I find it so important to have those conversations with a provider in a safe space, talking about the various different options that are available to you and what they all mean and why. Like literal pros and cons. Like the con list is crazy high, guys. And there are some pros that might be specific for your unique scenario. That could be like, I'm not going to ignore that. But I think like overall from the entire special, the thing that Dana's talking about how they have basically perpetuated the shame. And now there's like a whole new entryway of shame that can come up by either you did it the easy way, quote unquote, by taking the medication, or you chose not to take it. And now you're not doing what you need to do in order to do it. Like, and the fact that they are even in the special talking about like dipping their toes into the idea around the American Association for Pediatrics guidelines, they dip their toes into that as well, as if this could be an alternative. Whoa. I hated the AAP guidelines before. I hate them still. And I hate it even more that places and big companies like Ozempic are coming after our children. And it makes me really upset and it's really frustrating. And the way that they brought that in, and they did it so quietly, really quickly, but they planted the seed in every single parent, doctor, provider out there that this could be beneficial for children too. And the whole thing really breaks my heart the whole time that they basically just continue to reinforce, even though they say like, oh my gosh, the stigma's gone. Oh, people are nicer to me, my children. Like that's literally something that was said by one of the people there because I'm now in a smaller body. Like this is not a solution for discrimination. And I can't believe it's being presented as such. And then now we're hearing more and more, like they had the Weight Watchers CEO on too, because Oprah talked about how she left because of this whole thing, because she wanted to be an unbiased person. I think I mentioned that earlier. And quote unquote. And she said, so why do we need Weight Watchers if we have you? If we have Ozempic, if we have these GLP-1s, why do we need Weight Watchers? And the CEO of Weight Watchers talked about how she was like, this isn't your fault that you haven't been able to lose the weight. They kept calling it the weight. And being able to, like, I fucking hate that saying. And they talked about that a lot throughout. Like, it was actually very brief that they had the CEO on there, but she talked about how it wasn't your fault and how she's changing the game. And it was interesting. I don't know if people are starting to notice more and more that this is showing up on influencers as well. And people's bodies are changing who were once like body positivity and felt like it was a really safe space, or anti-fat bias individuals and people in like the styling world and influencers and clothing and plus size clothing and everything like that. People are seeing it kind of infiltrate into that area as well. But one of the people that I saw who actually spoke out against it and was like, no, is Katie Suterino, I think. And she had a reel where the CEO of Weight Watchers responded to her in their own Instagram, apologizing for the damage and shame that she put on her, that Weight Watchers put on her, not her herself, but that she was learning a lot from her book and stuff. And so to me, it felt like, God, you guys are missing the point. You're missing the whole point. How beautiful it is that Katie had this moment with, and Katie shared that about how it was like, this meant so much to me, hearing someone apologize for my experience. But then on the other hand, they're still saying that your body's not good enough for us and that there's something wrong with it. And to me, it's like, and again, like there's so much of an increase of people and influencers utilizing this and then seeing people changing their body and actually showing their intentional weight loss journey. And some people that I even follow are sharing it. And it's really hard to see because people used to go to them as this safe space of like reinforcing their own new body beliefs and trying to embrace their body and trying to break the internal stigma for themselves and trying to move through their world with a little bit more of their power taken back. And now they're seeing people that they had admired in that now talking about their weight loss journey through the use of stuff like Wegovy and Ozempic and all these different GLP-1s. And it's really hard. And it's like, in some ways, some people are sharing that it's harmful, right? Because it can be. It is harmful to you. And it's also complicated because that person has the right to do with what they want with their body because of the way that they have been stigmatized. I can't imagine being an online influencer on a really big platform and the amount of comments and shit must have come back to them about their body over and over and over again. And coming to a conclusion, a decision to embrace something like this probably did not come easy and probably was a really hard decision to make. And so that's why I think so much of it is like, the disclaimer at the beginning is this isn't to bring shame to people. It's to talk about how complicated this is. And I think at the heart of the complication is the fact that we as a society treat people differently based off their body size, and enough is enough. Like, it's just so awful that people are now electing to choose medications that they don't understand why it does what it does in order to protect themselves. And I'm not going to find fault with the person who's trying to protect themselves in an environment that's not safe for them. I'm going to find blame for the people who are trying to inflict harm on the people trying to protect themselves in an environment that, and then acting like as if they're saving them. It's shitty.
Then also at the same time, these drug companies are like, oh, this is the solution to the shame and blame and whatever, when you're not changing the system that is causing the shame and blame that you are actually contributing to.
This is the virtue signaling.
And a piece about the influencers that are either being targeted to promote Ozempic and Wegovy, which Virgie Tovar had a great article about this that I'll share, of how she thought it was spam, that she was being targeted by Ozempic and Wegovy. No, just kidding. They were trying to pay her to promote those. And she was like, oh, fuck no. But I think, you know, like Christina was saying, obviously everybody has a choice to do whatever they want with their own body. And I think when you are in a public space and you're an influencer of some kind, you also have a degree of responsibility to your audience. If you are someone who has been touting and trying to promote body love, body positivity, body neutrality, and all these things, and loving yourself the way that you are, it's very inconsistent to take the drug. But again, that's your own decision. But I think there's a difference between doing what you want with your own body and promoting the drug to people and being like, oh, this is the way that I'm finding body positivity, which sounds like it was very inconsistent with their former message. And if that then is creating an unsafe space for people, I think it's a very complicated gray area, right? Like that would be like, and this is a wild scenario that obviously would never happen, but that would be like if Christina and I publicly are promoting our wholehearted eating message, and behind the scenes we're doing like frickin' Slim Fast or something, and then all of a sudden we're like, everybody should do Slim Fast. Like that's wild. You know, it would be one thing if we decided to do that for ourselves, which is admittedly
really off-brand.
Our brand. Very inconsistent with our brand. But it would be an entirely different thing if we were like, sponsored by Slim Fast. You know, that's kind of what it's making me think of. And that would immediately make our space an unsafe space when we've tried to cultivate an extremely safe space for people with food and body stuff and nutrition stuff and gut issues and all these different things over the years. I don't know if that's equivalent, but that's just what it's making me think.
Yeah, but I think there's also, you know, I'm going to, devil's advocate, right? Like this is why these are Patreon episodes, guys. So I think like one of the things too, it's yes, what you're describing is way off brand. It would be a completely unsafe environment. 100%. That is like, talk about co-opting and then hiding behind. It's like, it reminds me of in Legally Blonde, where her alibi for her husband's murder was liposuction, and she didn't want anyone to say it because she was a fitness instructor. And she goes, it's not like normal people can have this ass. It's literally what she said because she was doing all this cosmetic surgery in order to look this way. And I was like, it's such a perfect description, right? Like, because you are selling something, and because you're in a public space, you are selling a persona. You're selling an agenda. You're selling yourself, your beliefs, your all of these things. And then if you're doing something behind the scenes quietly and hiding it, that is shitty. You know, that is false advertising, for lack of a better word. Mm-hmm. But there is a space, I think, for creating nuanced conversations of, hey, I've been struggling with this. This has been my journey with this. This is what's been going on for me. And I am going to share that this is what I'm doing. If you don't want to follow me anymore because of it, I feel you. I get it. This was not easy.
Yeah, and I don't think they did that.
I don't think they did either. They didn't, because I never saw that. But I'm just pointing out that there's a difference between the two things, and that it can be done. Whether or not that was done is totally like, I do not think that's what's happening. But if someone were to, in the space, start talking about that and share that and talk about their stigma, the abuse that they have felt and had, or their lack of mobility and how it's impacted their life and all the different things, or whatever it is, or access to things, or the ridicule that they have experienced in places just trying to live their life. And then they shared that, and then they said, hey, this is what I'm doing about it. And it sucks, but I want to be able to live in my life a little bit more freely without having this type of ridicule coming at me. I would not have any shade for that. I'd be like, damn, that is fucking brave to come on there and talk about that. Damn. Mm-hmm. That's what I mean by those nuanced conversations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think ultimately this could also, this is very parallel to what we were talking about with Oprah and people being very disillusioned and very upset and everything over Oprah. And there's a lot of Oprah bashing going around now, which is honestly, we shouldn't be surprised about because, again, her weight has been a national conversation for 25 years. And we also shouldn't be too surprised that she came out and did this special because it tracks, quite frankly. But I think there's also this point in our culture as just like a Western society that like people think that they, like us individual people, when you follow someone for a really long time, whether that's a celebrity or a podcaster or an influencer or whatever, you really feel like you know them and you don't.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying you guys don't know us. I'm not saying that at all. You know,
We're the exception.
I'm talking more like the Kardashians, and people think that they have a right to what goes on in those people's lives, and they think they know them so well, and they're like, well, that even goes back to me saying, like, that's very incongruous with what their brand was. And there are some people whose personal life is extremely different from their online presence or their public presence or anything like that, right? And I think that's part of the conversation is we all become so invested in these people and these personalities and these influencers and stuff like that to the point where it feels like a betrayal if they do something that we don't agree with.
But we're all just humans.
Yeah.
Walking through life, trying to figure it out. And we got places like these big pharmaceutical companies coming down and trying to shit all over it.
Well, because at the end of the day, they're just trying to make money. They really don't care about you. And that is ultimately the shittiest thing is they're like, we care about you. We promise. We feel so bad. Like there's been so much shame. Also buy our drug.
Yeah.
It'll fix it. I'm like, are you kidding?
Yeah. It's kind of like, that saying of like, oh, well, I care about you more than you care about yourself. It's like the definition of like health trolling. Right? That's kind of what they're doing with this. It's like they're health trolling and basically saying like, look, we have this cure for your body. And your body is like, it's just, the whole thing is really sick to me, the way that it is presented. And guys, don't watch the special.
Yeah. To bring a little bit of levity, a couple different things. I wish you all could have been privy to my phone when Christina was watching the special, because when I tell you she was rage texting me, like I would go fold some laundry for like 5 minutes and then come back and be like, there are 27 messages here. And I was like, I love it. Keep it coming. This is going to be great for the podcast episode. And it was like kind of funny because I had already like listened to a couple podcasts about it and like read a couple articles, and so I like kind of knew what she was going to see, but I didn't know exactly what time she was going to see it. So I was like, ooh, it's like when you've read a book before your friend and you're like, oh my God, I can't wait till you get to that part. Like, what's your reaction going to be?
But you know what's so funny is it definitely was like that. And I think the funniest part about it with the text messages is I literally said it was like 5 or 10 minutes into the special. And I said, I can't even watch this. Like, I'm just not even.
Yeah, you're like, I don't think I can
watch this. This is awful. Like, there's nothing more annoying than a literal billionaire talking like she's one of us. Like, girl, you are not. Like, you are not one of us.
Celebrities are just
never been one of us.
They go grocery shopping too.
Like, you have. She goes, where was the memo that this was like, that willpower wasn't a thing? It's like, girl, we've been talking about this forever. People have been talking about this forever. Where were you? You were getting paid. That's what you were doing. You were getting paid. And so the whole time I'm like, I can't even watch Oprah talk about this because there's nothing. It kind of reminds me of that show Loot that's like making fun of billion. Have you seen this? Oh my gosh, it's so funny. It's on Apple TV. Guys, check it out. It's basically about this billionaire who doesn't even realize that she has like a charity organization and all the things that they're doing. And she's like, oh, and how out of touch with reality she is. She calls her like 30,000 square home a cabana. And they're like, stop calling your house a cabana. Like, it's not. Like, because she sold her even larger. It's really funny. It's Maya, what's that actress's name who was on SNL? I can't remember. Maya something. You know what I'm talking?
Who was in
Yes,
Bridesmaids
yes.
too?
It's her as the main character. It's fantastic. I got a lot of that vibes throughout the episode too. And so it was so funny because I said to Dana, I was like, I cannot watch this. And then I proceeded to rage text her for the next 43
For 45 minutes.
For the remainder of the episode.
Maybe we'll share a screenshot or two on Patreon to go with this. That would be pretty funny. Another funny thing from before, when you said the big O, I had no idea what you were talking about. I was like, is she talking about Oprah? Is she talking about orgasms? Oh, she's talking about the bad word of obesity.
Yes, that's what I meant. Like, oh my God. You know what's funny is after I said that too, I thought to myself, this could be construed as a lot of other different things. And I'm like trying to be thoughtful, but I'm like, we've already said obesity like 10 times. I'm like, it's not.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys.
I mean, okay, we will end this discussion. We've been going for over an hour. But so you all know, this is, even though we're ending this current discussion here, this is not the end of us talking about all things Ozempic related. We have an episode coming up where we're going to be talking about, there are now companies that are trying to put themselves on as kind of like the natural Ozempic. And so we're going to do a whole episode on the main feed talking about, quote, natural Ozempics that are out there.
Are they real?
I even saw this bullshit thing the other day that was like, oats are the new natural Ozempic. And I was like, bitch, what are you talking about? God. So we're going to talk about oats. We're going to talk about berberine. We're going to talk about continuous glucose monitors. We're going to go back to talk about that $100 GLP-1 probiotic that still doesn't have any more studies behind it. So we would love to hear from you all. What are your thoughts on this episode that we've done? If there's anything else that you would love us to break down about these drugs or natural Ozempic stuff or other things that you've been seeing out there, or even if you just want to share your own experience,
please,
you can always get us on Patreon, comment on the episode in Patreon, or you can always email us if you want it to be more private, DM us on Instagram, wherever you want to find us.
And if you want to know more about Ozempic from like a one-on-one standpoint, and we reference the Step 2 study quite a few times,
we'll link
it all in there, and you can check out that episode where we kind of break down all the mechanisms of action so that you can understand it a little bit better.
All right, bye.